Buenos días, tardes, noches a todos los que siguen este canal. Hoy la transmisión será en inglés. Los que quieran ver esta transmisión en español, pueden verlo en el enlace indicado aquí abajo. Good morning, evening, afternoon to everybody who follows this channel. This is your host, Cristiano Moderno. Anybody wanting to watch this in Spanish, here's the link. Today, we conclude our week of Daniel. For the time being, we will come back and dedicate another week in the near future. Hoy concluimos nuestra semana de Daniel en inglés. Posteriormente dedicaremos otra vez a continuar con el libro de Daniel. Having said this, let's begin. We are about to read Daniel chapter 6. As I explained to you earlier, it was written in the 6th century. Daniel lived from the time of Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian Empire through the time of Darius the Great in the Persian Empire. Darius the Great is not to be confused with Darius the Mede. Other texts, like the one we saw yesterday, speak of Darius the Mede. Now, Darius the Mede is a caricature to represent the Persian Empire, just like Uncle Sam is a caricature to represent the American government. But Darius the Great was the fourth emperor of the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Empire. It was Cyrus, then there was Cambyses, then there was Pardilla, also known as Pardilla. Then there was Darius the Great. So Darius the Great ruled from the year 522 BC to about 480 BC. So Daniel died about halfway or sometime within the rule of Darius the Great. Daniel was an elderly person by the time the reading we're about to do took place. Now, both the Persian and the Babylonian Empire used Aramaic to communicate with the people in the empire, although each region had its own language. Therefore, because Aramaic was a language of the empire, Daniel was written in Aramaic. So, having said this, let's dive into our transmission and dive into the story. I want you to follow along with me. Open your books to Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius, this is Darius the Great, to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom. The satraps were kind of like governors, since the Persian kingdom extended from pretty much northwestern India all the way through what is now Turkey and Egypt. It covered a very vast region. In terms of territory, the Persian Empire was probably the largest, even larger than the Roman Empire. And so, in order to help him rule, the system that Darius the Great had established was he divided the empire into 3 regions, and each of the 3 regions consisted of 40 governors. 40 times 3, that would be 120 areas. And each of these 120 regions was led by a satrap. And these satraps had to respond to one of the 3 assistants to the emperor. Daniel was one of these 3 assistants that were named by the Persian emperor. What we're talking about is already clearly after the year 522 BC. Well, clearly 17 years after the fall of the Babylonian Empire. It's a time of the Persian Empire. The fourth emperor was governing. with three, what's here, 120 satraps with three administrators over them. Just what I was telling you. There were three administrators, and each administrator governed 40 satraps. One of whom was Daniel. Daniel was one of the three administrators who governed 40 satraps. Now, Daniel was such a person of God and such a person that inspired trust that no matter who was on top of the government, they always trusted him to be a faithful in the administration. We saw that under Nebuchadnezzar. And even after the fall of the Babylonian Empire, the enemy of the Babylonians still continued to recognize Daniel as an able and loyal administrator of the kingdom. So even though he was part of the leadership of the fallen empire, they still took him to help with the administration of this new empire. And therefore they gave him, now he was not only leader of the diviners, now he was the leader of 40 satrapies. He had pretty much a third of the Persian Empire under his control. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. So each 40 satraps had to present clear accounts to the administrators. And Daniel was one very good administrator. But where there is power, there is corruption. And no one knew this better than the very satraps that were supposed to report to Daniel. So now they wanted to find a place, since Daniel was pretty much second in command after the emperor as one of the administrators. They tried to find a position so that Darius would stop trusting in Daniel, because these people were full of envy. They wanted to overthrow Daniel's influence and take that power for themselves. So, knowing that corruption, that power corrupts, now they're looking for a way to accuse Daniel of corruption, but they fail. Let's see what goes on. Verse 3. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. The Persian emperor was planning on giving him a promotion, probably a successor to him. These administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs. They tried to find something they could accuse him for corruption. But they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was so trustworthy that neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God." They found out that Daniel was so faithful. Corruption could not reach him. He was over and beyond corruption. He made sure to dot every I, cross every T. Everything was well accounted for. So they realized that at least through the politics and the finances of what he had to administer, they could find no fault with him. But they also knew he was very devoted to God. At the same time, they knew that as a person who's very devoted to God, he would not deviate from worshiping the one true God. The only way they could catch him is through some accusation. The best thing they had to do at this moment was to push through the arrogance of rulers. Darius trusted Daniel. But Darius, as the emperor of the most powerful empire at the time, was not above uh, arrogance. The satraps who were under Daniel knew this, and they tried to play Darius's arrogance against him to catch Daniel. So they had set up a plan, which we see starting with verse 6. So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever. The royal administrator, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den." That's a plan. They're going to take advantage of Darius's arrogance, and Darius is going to declare himself a god, and he is to be worshipped for a period of 30 days. Nobody is allowed to worship any other divinity except Darius. Therefore, they were planning to get Yahweh out and toss him out, much like what's going on in today's time, much like what they did in schools today, tossing God out of the schools. Much of what many people are trying to do out of politics, tossing God out. And that worsens corruption. Since they know they couldn't catch Daniel under anything, they tried to catch him through the religious side, and they used Darius's arrogance for it. They're telling Darius to declare himself a god, and nobody is allowed to worship anybody but him. But the problem was that in Persia, ancient Persia, there was a law that once a law was to have taken effect, not even the king could cancel that law. He could pass another law to overcome the previous law, but he cannot officially say this law is no longer good. So this is the problem. These people who want to see Daniel dead use that against the king and against Daniel. Verse 8, "Now your majesty issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed." So King Darius put the decree in writing. Of course, he's arrogant. Oh, everybody's going to call me God. Ooh, nobody can say no. Ooh. Now, verse 10. When Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the window opened toward Jerusalem. Notice his window was facing the west. They're in Persia right now. Persia is due east, so his window was due west. He was praying towards Jerusalem, praying towards Temple Mount, which is now, unfortunately, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque stands. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. In other words, this new law passed by Darius had no impact on him. We must obey God before we obey man. So this is the problem with the concept of rule of law. Rule of law, if this is the law, you follow it. But there are laws that run against what God says. It's the rule of God that we need to follow. The rule of God needs to supersede the rule of man. So, therefore, if Daniel followed the rule of God, the rule of law, he would have strayed away from God and bowed down before Darius. But that's not what Daniel did. Daniel said, "Who cares about what this feeble man passes as a law? My God is a real God. I shall continue worshiping the one true God no matter where this takes me." So, in other words, he did not care whether the law allowed it or not. He knew that the one true correct thing is to worship the one true God. So whether it was legal or not, he continued praying to the one true God. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Now they got him where he wanted. They knew that Daniel was going to continue worshiping the one true God regardless. That's what gave him power and strength to overcome any temptations with the administration. And now that's what's giving him strength to overcome the evil law that had just been passed. And that's what these cruel and evil people who had envy against Daniel were counting on. Now that they got a king passing that decree, what do they do next? They lie in wait, knowing that they will catch Daniel sooner or later, praying to God, so that they could come with this information to the king, and then have the king kill Daniel. Thus, they will be getting rid of this very honest person who did not let them go and follow the corrupt ways. Remember, these people who want Daniel dead, they're the ones who report to him. These people are the corrupt ones. But Daniel, being a faithful one, did not let a single one slide. That's why they weren't able to find anything. Since Daniel did not let anything slide, they need to kill him so that they could exercise the corruption. They finally found a way to get rid of him. That's by accusing him of worshiping the one true God. And here we see another persecution of the Jews begin all over again. He continues telling us, verse 12, we will have ways. They do not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den. The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persian, which cannot be replaced. In other words, they're telling him, you remember that law you passed, right? Yes, I signed it. It's in place. Not even I can cancel it. Notice the arrogance was to put himself even above above God. Once again, what was that thing? Remember the Garden of Eden? You had the serpent who convinced Eve to put herself above God by eating of the fruit. We see the same thing going here. These corrupt governors who are trying to get rid of Daniel act like the serpent and entice the king to put himself above God. And this brings trouble to his friends, because before this time, Darius and Daniel were friends. But at this point, their relationship gets, you could say, tested. Verse 13. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. Oh, king, in other words, king, you passed this law, but hey, this guy you consider your friend, he doesn't care about what you're saying. He doesn't care about your power. He's still not worshiping you. He worships his God, who you said they could not be done. Verse 14. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. You see what's going on here? King Darius was a very good friend of Daniel. And he did not want to put Daniel to death, despite the arrogance, despite the fact that Daniel still worships the one true God and not Darius. But since this king is so much Darius's friend, Daniel's friend, he's trying to find a loophole in the law by which he could save Daniel. But he could not find any, because the law was binding to the point that not even an emperor or a king could cancel it. So at sundown, then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, Remember, Your Majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed. No takebacks. Remember, you passed this rule, and according to the law, you passed the rule, and as the king that you are, that rule cannot be canceled even by you. So the king was then easily manipulated. Now, there was an issue here. The Persian Empire had just gone through a civil war during the time of Bardiya. Darius the Great was trying to establish and strengthen his empire. If Darius did not follow through with that law, the people would revolt. And then there would be another civil war where Darius probably wouldn't survive. So he saw no way out. He had to follow and show that he was a firm king. Otherwise, he would have mutiny in his ranks. So he gave the order as to what was mentioned. And they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God to whom you serve continually rescue you." The king is worried about Daniel, but he cannot find anything way to help him out. So he's saying, you worship God, you pray to him 3 times a day. Even though my rule says the opposite, may he help you. Verse 17, a stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. So they covered the exit so that neither the lion nor Daniel could get out. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his noble, so that the situation might not be changed. So everything, it's sealed. That way, if the king comes back the next day and sees the seal broken, he knows somebody was tampering with it. That's what they're trying to catch, that nobody would come and rescue him. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. He was worried. Excuse me for a moment. Now, continue on what we were talking about. The king is worried about his friend Daniel. He is expecting his best friend Daniel to be dead the following day, eaten by the lions. That's why he does not want to eat anything, or he doesn't want any entertainment. He is depressed. He is in mourning. He's freaking out about the death of his best friend Daniel, who he, even being king, could not rescue. Estoy subiendo mi video, espérame. Estoy subiendo mi video, espérame. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. So then Darius is worried. He wants to know what happened of Daniel. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice. Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to rescue you from the lions? He's so worried. And he also wants to know if God is the God Yahweh whom we worship is the true God or what. So verse 21, Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel and he shut the mouths of the lions." Translation, the lions were on a diet. "They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done anything wrong before you, your majesty." It was totally innocent. And because he was totally innocent, God protected him from the lions. That is the reason why I titled this The Connection Between Daniel and David. Let's not forget that Psalm 23, which David wrote about, what is it, 500 years before Daniel. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your staff comforts me. Daniel is now going through the valley of the shadow of death as he is sealed up in a den full of ferocious lions. But God, through his mercy, puts those lions in a diet, and they don't even touch Daniel. The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel up from out of the den. So the king is excited. He has Daniel freed. But he is angry because now he discovers the true intentions of the people who accuse them. With this, he discovers that the people who convinced them to pass this law had evil purposes and wanted to kill Daniel, his best friend. They wanted to manipulate the law to force the king to kill his best friend and one of his most faithful administrators, Daniel, out of envy. But Darius also finds out that even though he is king over the most powerful empire of the world, the Persian Empire, he was still nothing but a man. And even though he was king, he was not able to free Daniel from the lions. Darius, being the king of the Persian Empire, the most powerful empire at the time, was not able to free his best friend from the lions, even though he was king. However, God proved that he was over and beyond any political power, any rule of man, by making sure these lions could not eat or devour Daniel. Thus showing that what the king was not able to do, God was able to do without a single problem. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. He was in there, even though he was blocked in with lions. He trusted God, and the lions did not even attempt against him. They didn't even try and bite him. Not even a scratch was found among them because God was his protector. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den. Falsely accused, why? Falsely accused because since Daniel refused to follow the decree of worshiping only Darius, these men made it look like Daniel rejected and betrayed Darius. Darius realized his innocence and then found out that Daniel would not have done anything against Darius. That's where it was a false accusation. Oh, king, Daniel has betrayed you. No, he hasn't. He's just being faithful to God. That's not betrayal of anything. Along with their wives and children, and before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all of their bones. The people, this is one of the many times throughout the Bible where we find that the evil people, the wicked people who want to destroy the people of God, end up themselves dying from their very own machinations. During this same time, we find, for example, Queen Esther, whose cousin Mordecai goes through a death threat through Haman, wanting to hang Mordecai. Yet instead, Haman, who wanted to hang Mordecai, ends up being the one hung through the very same tree that he had dedicated to the death of Mordecai. And there are many other examples as well where God protects his people, and those who seek to destroy God's people end up dying through their own evil schemes. Let's not be surprised with what's going on with the miracles going on in the Middle East right now in the defense of Israel. The king Darius wrote to all the nations and people of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is, I'm going through a little technical problem here. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. That's what we Catholics say Mass every day. His kingdom shall have no end. There will be no end to God's kingdom. God is the King of kings, the Lord of lords, and thus his kingdom does not cease to exist. He rescues and saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lion. He is aware that the fact that Daniel was not even touched by the lions is a miracle through which God manifests his power. Darius is recognizing that God, the one true God, uses this to show that he is powerful above all king and above all rulers. That's why he's the King of kings. No king or ruler has the power to go against what he teaches. Darius tried to put himself above God, and instead God shows that he's above Darius by doing what Darius could not do, which is freeing Daniel. Today in Israel, the United Nations and countries like Iran and terrorist groups like Hamas, Houthis, and Hezbollah have tried to destroy Israel. But instead, Israel comes out victorious each and every single time, because whoever fights against Israel fights against God. And God's kingdom will have no end. God is rescuing Daniel anew through what's going on in Israel. The story of Daniel should remind us that neither the United Nations nor all these countries trying to punish Israel for defending itself will ever be victorious. Because God is the one who fights for Israel. God is the one who fights for his people. That's why it says here, he rescues and saves. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lion's den. And today, Daniel is once again in the lion's den, surrounded by Iran, surrounded by the nations. Interestingly enough, Iran, remember, this is the Persian Empire, which was based in what is now Iran. So we see this going on and happening all over again. The Persian Empire sticking to destroy the Jewish nation and putting the Jewish nation in the lion's den. The current Persian Empire, the nation of Iran, the current Darius the Great, the current Darius the Mede, the Ayatollah of Iran, has put Daniel in the lion's den through Israel. Israel is that Daniel that is now in the lion's den. These lions are Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the United Nations, and countries that are pushing a ridiculous trial in the ICC, such as South Africa. Shame on those countries which are the lions, because guess what? These are the lions that will not be able to touch Daniel. But when those who are truly trying to destroy Daniel, those who are truly trying to destroy Israel, they are the ones who are going to instead destroy themselves. Verse 28, So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So Daniel, it's interesting that they put Darius first and then Cyrus, when it was Cyrus first and then Darius. It was during the second year of the reign of Cyrus the Great that the Babylonian Empire falls to the Persian Empire. And then Darius is the fourth emperor. And like always, and like we see in this and many other texts in the Bible, what happened here? Like we see here and in many other texts in the Bible, the Lord Jesus Christ is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Long live the King of Kings. Long live Christ the King.